let me know if you guys can hear me okay. Just answer a question, ask a question, and let me know if my sound sounds good to you guys. And we'll get started in about 30 seconds or so. Okay, can y'all hear me okay? My sound coming through? Okay, once again, my name is Brian Patrick. This is Iron Speed 201, Iron Speed Designer, the intermediate class. This is the longest of the classes. It's about 3 hours long. And if you've taken this class before, if you haven't, the way that it works is we have a slide presentation that we go through. And then I'll be jumping back and forth between the slideshow and Iron Speed Designer to show you how to do certain things in Iron Speed Designer. It's scheduled for 3 hours, but usually I end up taking about 2.5 hours to complete the slide presentation. And then what we'll do is we'll have questions at the end. Anything in particular you guys want to see that I've covered or haven't covered, I will be happy to try, show you or try to go through it at the very end of the class. I tend to talk pretty fast, so if I'm going too fast, let me know. I'll be happy to repeat any slides or go back and repeat anything that I may have glossed over or turned too quickly, but that's the way it works. Okay. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just read the slides to you because that's pretty boring, so I'll put them up there. If there's anything I have to add, I'll go ahead and add. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw it out there. I'll be happy to answer at the time, or I'll say maybe I'll get to that later, and then we'll go over that slide later at the end of the class. Be happy to show you some examples and stuff. Okay, if you haven't taken this course before, there's 3 parts to it, and usually there's some breaks between, but I tend to gloss over pretty fast the first 2 parts. This is the intermediate Iron Speed Designer, so hopefully you guys have done the basic stuff. I'm not going to go heavy in detail into that. I'm going to get to some of the more advanced stuff that's at the end of the course, which to me is more interesting. Okay, the second part we'll talk about some page customizations where you'll spend a lot of your time in Iron Speed. And then at the end, we'll get to some advanced applications, configuration, things like that, modifying the queries and some stuff that I find more interesting, and so hopefully we'll spend more time on that part of the course. Okay, this is kind of the Iron Speed application development philosophy. What you'll do is you guys have already done application generation. I'm sure you've done this many times in your existing applications where you'll run the wizard and then just go through and modify the menus and the pages, and then customizing and just kind of refining your application as you go along. Well, nothing new here. Okay, let me know if I'm going too fast. Like I said, I tend to gloss over this first part pretty quickly so we can get to the interesting things. But if I'm going too fast or you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Okay, so this first part we'll go over just kind of a basic application generation. And you've probably heard this before. If you've taken any of the other classes, they say prepare your database. IronSpeed looks at your database and generates the pages from the way your database is laid out. So you want to go ahead and make your database as well defined with your foreign keys and things like that before you start using IronSpeed Designer. A lot of things you can do in IronSpeed with the virtual foreign keys, the virtual primary keys, but if your database already has those in there, you're going to find that IronSpeed is going to generate more pages for you. Your drop-down list will be populated for you. You don't have to go there and do a lot of formulas, things like that, just so that it makes it easier for IronSpeed to determine what it is you want your database to do, and it will generate the pages for you. And I'm pretty sure you guys have all done the application wizard generating application. I've already created an application just because the time it takes to go there and synchronize with my very large database. I've gone ahead and created one. So I'll kind of gloss over these next few slides. Unless you really want to see me generate an application from scratch, I'd be happy to do it, but hopefully you guys have done enough of those that you know what it looks like. Okay. So if somebody wants to see that, I'll be happy to go on. This is just some examples. Don't know if you guys have created any kind of web application, any kind of mobile applications yet, but it does work very well. I have one application I've done that has a web and a mobile part. And one thing I really like about that is if you log into the mobile part, you can seamlessly go back and forth between the web application and the mobile application. And we'll get to this later on. We're going to add some security to our app later on, and when you do that, you get a sign-in page so you can have your customers log into your application for security. Sorry. Any questions so far? Like I said, this is pretty simple stuff. The intro stuff you guys probably have done either in the earlier courses or you've done on your own. Okay. Okay, now we'll get to some of the interesting things. RSpeed is an application generator, so there's many ways that it can generate your application for you, many different options that you can use to generate your application. So when you go to generate your application, you can click on the options button, and it will give you places to set where you can do many of the options like number of rows in a table, encrypting your parameters, things like that. Does anybody want to see where that is? And there's actually 3 different parts to those options. Some options have to do with new application. Some have to do with only when you generate a new page, so it won't modify any existing pages. And some have to do with the generation globally, so when you change them, they take effect immediately. So that's kind of the question that comes up often is people will generate a number of pages and they'll set the number of rows they want to show in a table. And if you change that in the options, those only apply to new pages that IronSpeed generates from then on. So it won't go back and modify anything on an existing page. If you try to run the wizard again, hoping to pick up some of those options, what's going to happen is IronSpeed is going to generate your page and add a 1, a 2, a 3 to it. So you end up getting multiple pages with just a suffix of 1, 2, 3. They'll have the new options, but they're probably not what you wanted. Okay. And we can certainly would anyone like to see this with different options? I have an application that I generated earlier today, and right now it just has a couple of show tables and a couple of pages. It's just 2 tables that are related, and what they do is they have, for instance, this page right now will show us page size of 10, and we can go and I can change that in the options, and the next time I generate a page, it will actually I can set that to 20 or 30. Would anybody like to see me do that? I'd be happy to do it if anyone wants to see it. Okay, I guess not, so we can go on. Like I said, if you guys want to see anything, just let me know. I'll be happy to go back and show it. And, if I'm going too fast, let me know. But once again, I kind of like to get toward the more interesting things. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, this is all pretty standard, IronSpeed stuff that you may have done. Well, cool. That was very quick. We went through the first part of the course in about 10 minutes, which is pretty typical for me. like I said, we kind of breeze over it. So now we're going to spend a little time doing probably where you're going to spend most of your time in IronSpeed, and that is the page customization. That is, you'll take the pages that IronSpeed generates, and you're going to lay them out. You're going to kind of clean them up, rearrange some fields, add your tabs, do things like that. Change your logos, change your wording if you want. Okay. Now, you certainly don't need to know HTML to use IronSpeed, but what you can do is, if you do know HTML, then what you can translate is what you see on the screen translates into a table. So every row on an IronSpeed Designer page versus your row number 1 is actually a row in a table. IronSpeed is going to take this and use the tables, the table row, table data structures from what you design here, which is why you'll see these ones like this, for instance, this address that has crossed 3 columns, that directly translates into an HTML table data cell span of 3. You don't have to know that, but if you do, then it may help you to kind of do the translation between what IronSpeed is showing you and what it's generating. Okay. So the next thing we're going to show you is you probably worked with the cell editor, and that is to work with one cell. Before we show the spreadsheet view, which was an array of cells there, in the cell editor, you're working with the contents of one of those cells. Okay. You can directly modify. You can actually type into those cells directly if you want to put in some static text. You can. You notice in this example they have the word phone there. They're showing a field, a phone field from your database, but then right behind it they're going to have the word phone. So one of the interesting things it says there is this: don't modify the gen tags unless you're an expert. I am an expert. I don't modify them, so I would stay clear of modifying anything that IronSpeed has generated. You can copy them, you can move them, but don't try to change anything inside that gen tag. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, if you're familiar with Word and Excel, you're familiar with the modifying a cell in Excel where you can modify the tags for fonts and size and colors, bold-faced or underlined. And you can do that directly in IronSpeed too with your cell. For instance, if I go to design mode here, I can pick any cell I want, go to my cell editor, and I can change my bold for that particular cell. Underline, just like you could in Excel, and then when I run it and display it, this particular cell will be in boldface. Now, there's other ways to do that too. We can do that through our style sheets, which we'll talk about later. But if you want just to go ahead and override one cell, it's just as easy to do it here. I can go here and I can change the font size on this particular cell, make it 16 bold. And then when I look at it, that particular cell is going to be nice and bold and large. Okay, to be honest, I don't even remember which field it was. I think it was one of these fields here. That was my address label in my column headings. Sorry, that was my address label on here. Okay. Okay. Somebody asked, on a table, is it easy to make the control disappear based on the data in that row? Yes, it is. It's very easy. I can show you where to look, and we can actually demonstrate that later. In fact, I can do that later. Let's do that later in the class when we get to some of the code customization wizards. There's one called, there's a code customization wizard called highlight a row based on a value, and you can use that to simply hide a whole row if you want to. But we'll do an example of that after the class. Okay. Okay, this is another way to change the display of a cell, like I talked about. We can modify the cell's style, and you'll notice there's one called, on this particular cell, there's one called table cell label. If we know our style sheets, if we go through and look through our styles in IronSpeed, we can change that to another style, and this will happen a lot. This happens a lot if you're dragging and dropping fields. Say on this particular, let me find okay, so on this particular page, if I were to take this cell, you notice that my cell style is called table cell value, and this cell style is called table cell label. So if I were actually to take the city and drag it down here, what's going to happen is I didn't drag the whole cell, so it's actually going to keep the wrong CSS that I want for that particular cell. So what you can do is I say I actually want to make it a label like the rest of these, make it the same style. I can click on my styles button, and then change it right here. Just change it to table cell value, or whichever CSS class I want. And you'd also do this if you were to create your own classes. We'll look at that later in the class here, where we'll copy some cell styles or copy some CSS classes, and then we can modify our cells to use that class. Any questions about that? So there's a couple of ways you can go ahead and modify how something is displayed on your page. One is go into the cell editor, doing it here, or two, changing the cell style in our which class we want for our cell. Okay. Okay. A little example, they want us to change the background color and change a font weight. This is another way to do it. You can do it in the cell itself, or we can also change this background color to FF7878. I'd be happy to do that if you guys would like to see it. Similar to what we did earlier. Let me pick one here. Let's look at this. Let's look at this particular page and what it looks like. And what it's saying is we can simply change how we want that particular cell displayed by putting the style in that style editor. For instance, if we want to change the school district name field here, go back, and we can put that style right in here. Let's go ahead and get rid of the style that's there. And we can say style, background, color. Okay. So real simple. You can see I changed the background color of that particular cell. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay. So another way we can modify the appearance of our application is to modify the CSS. If you're not familiar with CSS stands for, so cascading style sheets. And in IronSpeed, they're called themes. What they do is when you pick a theme when you generate your application, those are associated with a particular style sheet that IronSpeed has come up with. You can do your own style sheets if you want to. You can start with what they have done and create your own. I've done that myself. That way you can have your own particular style that you can modify without having to modify each individual application that you generate. Say you want a style that goes across several of your applications. You can modify it, create your own style sheet, create your own CSS files, and then use them amongst multiple applications to kind of get the same look and feel. just some things to do with style sheets. If you've looked at them, there's two files that you will have seen. One's called base styles and styles. And if you've ever looked through it, it looks a little bit like this. We can go to our app themes. And it'll look like this. And you can see there's literally dozens of different styles defined for you. Okay. And if we were looking there, we'd find the one for those table cell labels and table cell values that IronSpeed had generated for the page, and we'd find them in our base styles file. Okay. A couple questions about which files to modify. So pretty much the easiest way to do a modification of a style is, say we wanted to modify all of our labels to be a different font or a different style or make them all bold. The way you would work with that is to go to your styles file. If you look at your styles, yes, it actually says the best way to do this is to copy from the base styles file, copy it to this file, and then overwrite it there. So we could come to our base styles, find our table cell label. Okay. So these are how it defines the table cell label. We could copy the whole section. We don't need to. We only, pretty much all we really need to do is copy the one line that we want to override. But we can certainly copy the whole part here, paste it, and then we can change whichever parameter we want to. Like if you want to change the padding, the top, the right, we can change our color. Instead of BBB, we can try like make it 3-3, so it won't be quite as bright. And if we save it, we don't even have to rebuild our app. We'll just save that. If we go back to our page now and do a force reload, what will happen is it'll pick up that style sheet immediately. Okay, so if I see if I can do a let's do a rebuild. Let me see if I can. I'm actually going to run this. Let me refresh this page. And actually, what I did is I ran it on my. I ran it so you can see what it is. I changed that style sheet. It was this, which is that BBBB. And if you look now, I changed it to 3333, which is a little darker font and a darker color. And now you can see everywhere where I've used that table cell label, it's picked up my new style sheet. So that would be one easy way you want to modify the look and feel of the whole application, is copy a section to your styles.css, override it, and then it pretty much instantly takes effect in your application. Okay, so he has, can you create a custom template and copy it for each app you develop? Meaning I don't want to recreate the template each time I start a new application. I'm not sure what you mean by template, if you mean by your master page or you mean by your style sheets. You can certainly do both. You can copy your master page, which also defines the look and feel of your application. And you can also copy the style sheets. And you can certainly do that. You can copy a master page or a style sheet to any application you want. In fact, that's what we were just saying. If you want to create your own theme, you can do that and share that amongst multiple applications. But if you're talking about a template, I'm not sure if you're meaning the style sheet or if you're meaning the master page, which the master page is the kind of determines if your menus are down the side, if it's centered, where your heading is, where your footer is. I think we talk about those a little later on, but you notice there's several different master pages here on the side, and they pretty much define how your pages are looking, how they're all tied together. Okay, any questions over modifying your CSS? Okay. And here's an example. They say change the dialog header template. I went ahead and I did the table cell label, so we won't do that. It's essentially exactly the same thing. I changed the font size and changed the color. I did that with with the label, so we won't do DHT. Now, I'll show you a little trick here. One great trick is people go, hey, how do I know which element I want to change, which CSS we are wanting to modify? And pretty much all the modern browsers have a developer mode. So what I can do is I can come over here in my browser. I can launch developer mode, and this is Chrome, and I pressed F12, developer mode, and I can go to this little magnifying glass, this little inspection glass, and I can highlight over an element, and it actually tells me which CSS to modify. So if I look here, if I click over, I'm holding over this label, and it just says table cell label. So that's brilliant. So if you don't want to go looking through those dozens and dozens of style sheets trying to know which element to change, you can just go to developer mode. And Internet Explorer has it, Chrome has it, Firefox has it. Table cell label, you'll see table cell value. Your header here. Pretty much everything you want to look at. It tells you exactly which style sheet you need to go modify if you want to change the look of that element. Okay. Any questions about that? It's kind of a neat little trick, to know which element you want to change. Okay. So here's a custom page style. You can copying one of the themes, make your own. Like I said, I've done that myself in the past. I did it with a version 8 app. There's one downside to that, and that is when you do that, it's kind of tied to that version of IronSpeed. So if you upgrade your version of IronSpeed, you actually have to go into that theme file and change the version in there. So that's the only thing I'll say about that. You can certainly do that, but there is an extra step involved if you upgrade your version of IronSpeed. You do have to go into your theme file, modify the version that it was associated with to be with the new version of IronSpeed. Any questions so far? We're going very fast, so we are. Hopefully we'll have lots of next time at the end here to show anything specific that you guys want to have seen. I'll be happy to do any kind of demos or any kind of any kind of examples you guys want to see. Any questions on style sheets or themes so far? Okay. Okay. Somebody asked, how do we change the height of the table rows? And that's a really good question. Since that's pretty much apropos to what we're talking about, let's see if we can figure that out real quick. Okay. So the question was, how do we change the height of all the table rows? And I'll tell you what, I do that myself every time I do a new application. So let's see if I can figure this out. I'm sure we can. Okay. So let's look at our page. Let's find a page that has some rows. It's a very good question. The question was, how do we change the height of all these table rows? For instance, we'll look at this one. This one, it may be a little hard to tell because there's not much space in there to begin with. And it also depends on which theme you have. Different themes have different amount of white space above and below them. But we'll see if we can kind of tighten this one up just a little bit. Okay. Let's do like I said, where we talked about our developer mode. Let's see if we can find out what the CSS is for that particular row. Let's see if we can figure this out. Well, these are all table cell values. You notice that every cell in this particular row, and once again, it depends on the theme that you choose, but these are all table cell values. Okay, this is actually a table cell value. What we can do is, if you notice there's a little white space above it, and if you don't like that, and same thing here, you notice there's a lot of white space kind of between these fields here. So what we can do is we can go to our table cell label and our table cell value, and you'll notice that, and in fact, let's look at the one I copied. Let's look at the one that I copied over. This table cell label, you'll see this padding top. There's 8 pixels on the padding top. Okay, that's a lot of space. 8 pixels. That's almost half the row. So typically, what I tend to, and there's padding bottom. There's 4 there. Let's go ahead and copy the table cell value from our base styles. I'm just going to do a find table cell value. Let's find it here. There's actually quite a few of them that are a derivative of it. There it is. Okay. So here's my table cell value. And I'm going to copy that whole section to my styles because I want to override them. Okay. So I've copied table cell label and table cell value. And you notice they've got a lot of white space, padding top and bottom. There's actually 8 pixels on the top and 4 pixels on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those in half. So we'll do 2 and we'll do 4, and we'll do the same thing here. This padding 8 means padding 8 cells, 8 pixels all the way around. Let's go ahead and make that 2. And what that will do, in fact, we don't even have to rebuild our app because style sheets are loaded on the fly. We just have to save it. Okay, let's go back to our page, and all I should have to do is just reload this page, do a force reload, and we should see all this get tightened up a little bit. All that white space that is there, there you go. You notice now we can actually see a lot more of it. See how there's a lot less space above and below it? And all I did is I just took out that padding that was in that theme. You know, I used the developer mode, found my CSS for that particular element that I wanted to modify, and now if I look over here and if I click it and I select my cell, come on, hello. If I go to there we go. If I go to my table cell value, you should see now this little designer mode where it says on the bottom right where I'm looking, it says padding 2. So that tells me that that's overridden from my CSS that I changed. And you can kind of see where it's overridden here. My table cell value is smaller. So that's a really easy way to tighten up that row for you. And I typically do that myself. I will kind of cut down a lot of that white space that's on there, but that's how you do it. Okay, any other questions about CSS? Okay, great. I think we're going too fast. No, I was kidding. I like to go fast. Okay, so now we'll talk about the property sheet, and once again, you guys have used IronSpeed, so you are probably very familiar with the property sheet. Don't know which versions you have used in IronSpeed. This latest version that we're using today, and they've really changed. Let's go back to. I'm gonna have to build it here. We'll go back to our layout, and you'll see the property sheet kind of determines everything that you can change about the page and the cells and the tables that you're looking at. Let's go back here to our layout editor. Oops, let's pick a page. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the property sheet over here. And from here we can change our security, we can change a lot of things. And they did recently change the layout of this, and to be honest, even myself, I have problems finding where they've moved things to. But everything is here. They used to have things scattered, so it's kind of nice that everything's in one place. A lot of this page setup, you used to have to drill to find where to change even your page title. You know, the one that shows up in your browser tab. Right now, that's visible right here. In fact, it's right here, this title. Okay. So this has to do. You notice that every time I click on something, the properties will change, so that they're always context sensitive based on which control that I'm selecting. For instance, this is a text box, so therefore it actually has more. I'm sorry, there's actually a drop-down list, but also it's dependent on which element I've selected on my design form for which properties show up in my properties tab. Any questions about the properties tab? This is probably going to spend a lot of your time changing a lot of the, this is where you can change the background color of your cell and things like that. So you probably spend a lot of time modifying the properties of your elements. Okay. And you can see some of the uses there of, some of the things you can change on your property sheet. Okay. One of the really good uses for the property sheet obviously is to change the type of control that you're looking at. So for instance, if you had a text box where somebody could type in something and you wanted to make it so they could only read the data without changing it, that's where you would change, you'd use the property sheet to change that. For instance, say we don't want them changing the zip code. We can simply change our control type from a text box. Let's go over here. Change it from a text box to a literal. And what that would do is that would just simply make that particular control be non-editable. Okay. You don't see right now because there's actually no zip code for this particular one, but you notice there's no longer a text box there. Versus there's text boxes here, but I changed the zip code to a literal, so there's no text box for me to change that field. Another thing you might change is, for instance, this is a state drop-down. The properties panels where you also change it from a drop-down to a quick selector and vice versa. For instance, this is a quick selector, but this is a drop-down. So if you wanted to change those, you could do that too. If I want to make my market be a drop-down. I would do that in the property sheet. You've probably done that. You probably have modified your applications the same way. Another useful is to go to the required invisible fields. It's like I talked about, changing from a quick selector to a drop-down. The next thing is that if you notice here, this is on the actual generation options. You can change the preferred selector control from a quick selector to a drop-down. So if you want to do that for all the new pages, and so you want to drop down throughout your whole application, you can change it on the app generation options, and every new page from then on would be using that control. Now, it won't go back and modify your existing pages, but any new pages that are generated would use either drop-down or the quick selector. Okay. This is okay. Somebody asked, in the properties, I'm not sure why, but the rows option does not show up everywhere. The default seems to be 6 rows in the edit table, but that's too big. Somebody's talking about the edit rows. Let's take a look here. I don't think I have an edit table on mine. Let's see if I have an edit table. I have a group table. I could generate one quick. Somebody had talked about the number of rows on the edit table. Let's see here. Let's take a look here. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. I do not see it on mine. These are show tables. This is actually not an edit table. So what you can do here is, if I select the controls and see where it says 10 here, but let's take a look on an edit. I don't actually have an edit table here. I have an edit group by. This should tell you, number of rows should say how many rows to display. For instance, if I look at this one, if I change this one here, it will be 10 rows. Let me just roll that up. Should be 10 rows here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? I go back to my layout editor and I change it to 20. Okay. Oh. Somebody's asking about 6 rows. You may be referring to they're probably referring to an, I'm sorry, I'm rereading this question somebody asked, talking about the 6 rows. If you look at a edit field here, and this actually happens sometimes too, if I go to my edit school districts, it may be referring to this here. For instance, the 6 rows here. Some fields, depending how long they are, if we go to our design layout, this will happen sometimes if you change it. Say you have a really, really large field, and IronSpeed picks the editor that has all the controls, the HTML controls, and you change it to an ASP.NET form. What will happen is even though you change the number of rows, let me see if I can show you here. This happens to me all the time, so I'll pass along this little advice. You kind of want to look at 2 different places here. If I change this to a multi-line text field, you notice where it says rows 2, okay? You think by changing that, it would change the number of rows on your screen. Well, what happens is if you change your control type from one of the HTML editors to an ASP multi-line, it actually doesn't use this rows and columns fields here. What you want to do is you want to make sure that there's nothing under this height and width field. Because what will happen is if you had a really large field, it'll put a height and a width here, and then you change it to an ASP multi-line text mode, it will keep the height and width fields. So you want to delete those, and then it will use the columns and the rows. So that may be what's happening there. That happens to me all the time. I'll have a really large text box. I'll change the type of editor, but it doesn't change the size of it. So, okay, so that's all I would suggest. Make sure that you don't have an overridden layout height and width that's overriding the columns and rows in your text box. Okay, any other questions? Okay. You guys have probably done this. This is kind of one of those one-time things you do on a new application. You want to modify your header and your footer. Always good to know where those are. Okay. So we go to our header and footer. Makes sense. Find our header here, and we can find here's our logo file. This is where you're pointing to if you have a file you want to change your logo to, obviously. Go ahead and click on image URL, and that can be a full URL with an HTTP, or it could be a relative URL like they have here where they're pointing to a particular file. Same thing with the footer. Like I said, this is something you'll do maybe one time. I typically don't even do it right away, but you'll go, oh yeah, I really need to go clean up that footer here, and there's the text for the footer right there. Okay. Easy enough. Like I said, those are things you do one time. Yeah. Okay. Logo, I just showed you where to change the logo. And once again, you can point to a URL, a relative, or an absolute URL. If you got a logo file somewhere on the web, you can point to that. Any questions so far? Maybe we'll do a next little section here, and we'll take a little break at 2 o'clock. Somebody asked, do you have to do a password change page yourself? I didn't see one. Yes, you do, and we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later on when we get to the security, which is kind of later in the class. But you do have to do a password change page yourself. It'll do a remind me password automatically, but the password change, you do have to create one yourself. Okay, so now we're actually on the part 3. Wow, we've gone really, really, really fast. We've gone through the first 2 parts of the class in 45 minutes. So we're going to hopefully spend some more time on this section. You'll have some questions hopefully, or we'll have lots of time at the end to go over what you want. But let's go ahead and get started on this last section. We'll do a little part of it, and then we will go to take a break. We'll go on. This is the longest section, but we'll take a break here at the top of the hour. But let's go ahead and get started. We have a little time. We can probably get through part of this. But this is the most interesting part of the class, in my opinion. Okay. Okay, modifying the menus. Probably done that yourself, right? used to be that you had to go in here. There's a couple ways to modify menus. There are actually, if you're old school, you can go to the menu panel and you can come over here and actually modify your sitemap. That used to be how you had to do it in IronSpeed, modify this little text file. But now they have this nice little, and in fact, I forgot this was there until somebody pointed it out to me. But now they have a little menu wizard where you go in and you can drag and drop your menu options here. And, if I want to move schools up, I can actually just pick up here and drag and drop it. Very, very nice for um, having nice little visual cues how to rearrange your menus and make stuff laid out like you want in the order you want. So there's one other thing I'll point out here. Say you have this top level menu here, and you have it going to the same URL as a one of your submenus. For instance, this show schools table. So that my schools up here go to the same URL, and it has this little question mark behind it. The reason is because that's not a limitation of IronSpeed. That's a limitation of the Microsoft menu control, where you can't have the same URL showing for two different menu options. And I don't know why that's a limitation, but it is. So if I take off that question mark, what will happen is you'll see it's giving me this duplicate URL warning. So if you see that when you're creating your own menu options, you'll see how it's in red here. One easy way around that is to simply put a question mark behind it. And what that does is that just makes the URL unique. It's the same thing as passing in a parameter to the ASPX page without actually passing any parameters. So it's kind of like adding a dummy parameter to it, and that gets around that little limitation. If you've ever seen that error, that gets around that little limitation of having the same URL twice. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. We did that. We modified the menu. We kind of dragged some stuff around. Okay, I think we have enough time to go ahead and go through the application security before we take a little break. Let's go through that. There's two types of security in an IronSpeed application, and they're called authentication and authorization. So authentication is who can obviously sign in, and that has to do with your users and your passwords. And authorization is a little more complex. That means once somebody's logged in, what can they do in your app? So that's so the first case you're saying anybody who can log in can do anything in the application, and the second case is saying you can log in, but you can only access certain menu options or certain buttons or certain things are visible on the page. Okay, any questions about that? I'll try to slow down a little bit. Okay. And when you run through the security wizard, there's several ways you can do the application security in your application. To me, the easiest is using a database. So it's you may be used to having a users and roles table, or if you have even if you just have a users and passwords file, they call that a login table or users table. Not necessarily having a roles table, but you have a users table. That's all you really need to add security to your application. But if you do have a roles table, and that says that these particular users have these particular rights to parts of your application. Okay, so a real simple way to do that. Okay, so we asked about pass-through Active Directory. To be honest, I've never used Active Directory on IronSpeed application, so I'm not sure about pass-through Active Directory, or you may want to ask in the forums about that. Unfortunately, I have never done Active Directory security with IronSpeed. Here's a simple users and passwords table. Okay. You notice that it has a field here that says email address at the bottom. If you do that, if you do specify an email field, IronSpeed will generate the forgot password link on your page, and we'll let them put their email address, and IronSpeed will actually go ahead and send them the email with the user and password. Okay. So the nice thing about IronSpeed is that say you have your users table and you have your roles table, and then you have your user roles table, which is the many-to-many table between the users and the roles. You don't actually have to specify your roles table to IronSpeed. You point to the user roles table, and if you have your foreign key set up correctly, IronSpeed will go ahead and know where to get the roles table and show you the roles that you can use for displaying the security in IronSpeed. So typically, you define a user table, a roles table, and then this user roles table, which ties the two together, and IronSpeed does all the work for you for maintaining the security of who can access which pages and even which buttons show up. You can do security for saying I want to hide the a delete button only for administrators. Any questions about that? And once you've set up the running through the wizard, and this is one of the things I really like about IronSpeed, is once we've added security to your application, you can go in and say it'll show you every page of your application and who has access to it, the permissions, and you can go in and you can assign the security to each page at one time. It's really nice to look at it and say, oh, I forgot to go back and add security to this page, because once you add this, once you run the security wizard, you may add more pages to your application and just totally forget to go add page level security to it. If you don't do that, then anybody can access that page in your application. So it's good to look at this one page, see who has which pages are missing security, and go add them right there. Okay, any questions about that? I really like that feature of IronSpeed where, because I go back and work on old applications all the time, I'll add pages, and then go through the security wizard and say, oh, just add it to these new pages. You can do it when you're working on the page. There's in the properties panel, it shows you the page security, but unless you specifically go look at that, it's hard to know for your whole application which pages you've forgotten to go add security to. And this is what I was mentioning before. You can actually add security to individual controls. So if you want a button that you only want to be visible for administrators, you can do that. Okay, let's go ahead and add, we'll add this and then we'll probably take a break after this. Let me go ahead and add simple sign-on authentication to my little application that I am showing you. So right now, this has access to everybody. I haven't added security yet. So I'll just run through the security wizard, and then maybe we'll take a little break. Okay. So I am going to add right now I'm just going to do a no roles. I'm just going to add the simple sign-in authentication, which is this users and passwords field. I'm going to look at I have a table called users. I know, lots of tables here. This could also be a view. You could generate a view that pulled in other fields and users table. I've done that as well, where I have created views for a subset of your users, and you can certainly use that as opposed to having a pointing to your whole users table. User password, sure, why not? Those all look good. And then I can configure a lost password feature. I'll go ahead and I think I have email address in there. Email address. I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll see that it'll add a lost email. Okay. And this is what I was talking about, where I can see, since I don't have a roles table, the only security I have are signed in or not signed in or no one. So we'll just set signed in to all the pages. Somebody asked if I share the presentation at the end of the training. I believe it is set up so that you get a copy of the presentation. If not, I think they'll email it to you. That way you can go through the slideshows. I'm not quite sure, but I believe the presentation itself is set up that way. If not, let me know and I can possibly email it to you. Shoot me an email. My contact information is on the IronSpeed website, and we can make sure you get a copy of the presentation. Like I said, if I'm going too fast, I'd be happy to go back and show stuff, and we'll have lots of time at the end to show you anything specific. Okay, so what I've done is I said make every page have a signed-in user, and that's pretty much it. Pretty simple, right? I've just secured my whole application to my users table. Okay, while that's building, I'll go to the next slide. Any questions so far? This is probably a great place to stop. I'll go ahead and just show you the login on that page, but then we may just take a little, 3 or 5 minute break or so once it's done building. Okay, it's done building. Now I can run my app. And you notice now we get a nice little signed in page. We're gonna actually have to sign in, and I can do that. And so once I'm signed in, I have access to the whole application. It's just like I didn't do any role security. I just did authentication. I'm sorry, authentication where I logged in. So once I do log in, I have access to everything in the application. Are there any questions so far over what we've gone? We're going blazingly fast, so we'll have lots of time at the end if you guys want to see. Anything specific you want to see, I'll be happy to demonstrate it. Okay. If not, let's go ahead and take a little 4-minute break to the top of the hour. We'll come back and then think of some questions to ask them, and then we'll start with those when we come back. We'll take a quick little break, and then we'll come back, and then we will go for some more. But we're already on the last section of the slides, and we will do some more advanced, and then we'll do some general questions you guys want. Okay, so a little break until the top of the hour. Okay, let's keep going. It's like I got the top of the hour, so hopefully you guys have checked your emails and done things. No new questions. Are there any questions over anything we've gone over so far? If not, we'll keep going. Okay, let's keep going then. So, y'all can still hear me okay, I hope? Okay, I got a couple questions coming in. Okay, very good. Somebody asked, how do I add a tab to a page that already has tabs, but I added a new child table to the parent? Okay, let's do that real quick. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think that's on later on. We're already past that, so let's go ahead. That's a great time to show it. Let's go to a page that has tabs on it. Somebody asked how to add tabs. This question comes up in the forums every so often, so it's a good place to add. Let's find okay, for instance, this particular table has a tab. Let's see if we can find one that actually has more tabs. Let's see if we can find one. Let's go to this. Somebody asked about a page that has tabs, and they want to add a tab. Well, we'll do it here. We'll go ahead and add it to this particular page. It's hard to see. There's a tab here that says Market, which is a show record on this particular. It's a record within a table, but that should be good enough to show what we want. It's probably a little harder than it should be, but let me show you how to do it. School districts table. Let's go to our table page in our layout. And what you'll see here, and I don't know if you can see this, but if we go to the cell that has the tabs in it, you'll see a couple controls here. One says tab container and a tabs, and then a record control. We need to go to our cell editor. If we look at our cell editor, what that looks like. Now, unfortunately, that cell is way too wide. It looks like this. We'll see our tab container and our tab panel, and then we see our record control. Inside our tab panel and our tab container, our nested controls there. So unfortunately, there's no easy way to add a tab to an existing tab panel. The only way to do that is to right-click on the cell that contains the tab panel, say remove tabs. Okay, so now we just have our plain record control. And what would if you had 4 tabs, you'd have the 4 elements that are on the tabs. And so we could actually add our new table control here. We could go to our toolbox and drag our new table to it into the same cell. Go ahead and filter it based on our parent record control. And then we have to go back and add the tabs again. We have to go back and say insert tabs. And you'll see it went back to what it had there. Unfortunately, right now that's the only easy way to add tabs to an existing tab panel. And one downside to doing it that way is you're going to lose your tab titles, the titles that were on the tabs themselves. So to get those back, what you have to do is go to each one of these that say tab panel, come to your properties page, and you'll see the title for that particular tab is right there. So it's kind of a pain to add a tab to an existing tab panel. That's why it's probably better to go ahead and if you think you're going to need a bunch of tabs, maybe add some blank ones and make them invisible, and that way you can go back and add it yourself. A lot of times what you can do, instead of actually having the record control in there, let's go ahead and remove these tabs. We can just insert some blank panels. So I've added some blank panels, and I can add record controls to those blank panels later on. So I can come here and say insert tabs. So now I've got 3 tabs on there. Tab 1, Tab 2, and Tab 3. And let me build that. Okay. And if I refresh this, now you'll see I have 3 tabs. Reload it. And of course, since I added security, I've got to log back in. And you'll see my 3 tab panels there. So what you could do is you could, add some blank panels, and then we could make those invisible, and then add content to them later if we wanted to. That just kind of saves you the trouble later on of having to remove them, add them. Kind of a pain. Okay. Question, is it possible to have a menu option that opens a non-IronSpeed page in a new tab? I don't see why not. I think we can. I think we can put anything you want as the URL. I'm not sure about how to do the target, though. I'm sure there is a way to do it. Let's go back to IronSpeed. Somebody asked how to have a menu option opens a new page. You can go to our configure menu. Let's just insert a menu item. You can put any URL you want here, but I'm not sure how to do the target to a new page. You may have to do that by modifying the menu sitemap. I'm not sure if there's a way to do it here. If there's a way to specify the target for that menu option. That I do not know. You might ask, yeah, if you can, in the forums. I don't know. There's probably a way to do that, where you can have a a menu option open in a new window. Okay. Somebody asked how to upload a CSV file and process or import into a table. That's not actually something that's covered in this class, but if we have a chance, we may try to show that at the end. IronSpeed does have, if we go to our pages, I bet there are on our actions. What he's talking about is doing these import wizards, import data. To be honest, I've never actually used the import wizard, just because there's a lot of limitations. If there are foreign key references in your table. For instance, if I'm uploading to my schools here, this is a foreign keys into my school districts. I'm not sure how IronSpeed handles the foreign key references. So there is this wizard built into IronSpeed, but I've never actually had experience with it to make it work. Typically what I'll do is I'll have just an upload button into a database field, and then I'll have a process button that will go in there and read that field and then process it on a button click. Not necessarily using the IronSpeed wizard, import wizard, but that's something you'd have to write yourself. That's not something built in IronSpeed. They have this import wizard, but I've never used it myself to import it. It may work with simple tables where you have just a bunch of data, but I don't think you can specify your primary keys and things like that. Okay. Somebody asks, is it possible to change the attributes of a tab panel? That is a question that comes up every so often in the forums. I think you can't change the background color. These are standard ASP.NET tabs, so you might look online to see it. We could try using our wizard here. Our developer mode, and we should see that this background is a dbody. So you could go there and modify the CSS and change the dbody, but that's going to modify it wherever that particular table is used. So we can actually do it here. For instance, I have this tab panel here that I created, and we could do this. We could go to my tab panel that I created, and then change the style of that. For instance, if I go to my edit school districts, I'll just take. So remember, I created some blank panels here. And I could come here and change the cell. I could change this background color for the cell. Oops, I'm sorry, background color. Let's make this really onion green. So essentially what I do is I have just this one panel, this one blank panel inside a tab panel. Let's see how that looks. Reload. And just because I'm lazy. So there you go. See, what I did is I actually just put I changed the attributes of the cell. That was my one tab panel. So you could do something like that where you had inside your tab panel, put a blank panel, and then change your cells the background of the cells to be whatever you want there. I don't believe it's possible to change the attributes of the tabs themselves. They may be under the CSS, but if you wanted the background, you can certainly do it this way. Any other questions? Okay, we still have about half the slides to go through, but it should go pretty quick, and then we'll take some general questions or some examples. But if you have any questions over what I've already shown, I can go back and go over that, or we can wait to the end and then show you some specifics on how to do certain things. If you have just some really specific examples that you want to see, we'll do that at the end. Okay. So this is the action section of the property sheet, and this is where you'll modify certain actions that occur. For instance, you'll see some of the formulas. If you're used to using some of the older versions of IronSpeed, the last couple of versions, they call them formulas. They're still called formulas. They're kind of done in kind of grouped together a little differently in this latest version. You'll see where we can do a display as first and last name, and certain things. A lot of this is already built by IronSpeed for you. You know, if you go to a particular record, we'll see that IronSpeed did most of that for you. Let's see if we can go to our record here, where we can override them. But a lot of those formulas that we saw there. Let's go to our record. Oops, I'm sorry. You know, they'll say this is what we're talking about, which controls to save and save in a database. So it's a little different, just kind of a little different layout than they had in the previous versions. But this is where you'd override whether or not to actually save this field in the database and things like that. For instance, literals by default aren't saved in the database. You can override that and tell it to save this field if you want to initialize from a parameter, things like that. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, so now we have some actions triggered by events, population, initialization, validation, saving data. And this is where you'd overwrite some of the behavior of IronSpeed as it's doing its processing by the events that it's processing, like displaying a record. You can tell it to display certain fields or a concatenation of certain fields, things like that. Okay, funny, I had two questions that are almost identical. They want to know about auditing and capturing the user ID of fields, and we'll talk about that. I think we actually talk about that later. If not, we'll show it. We're talking about some auditing fields that we want to add, and I believe it is coming up later. I can't remember, but if not, we'll show you how to do that. It's very simple, how to run some auditing fields. But I think we get to that. We talk about some database layer stuff later on. Okay, so you'll see a lot of forms, and this is, you may see this if you look through some of the IronSpeed generated code. You'll see some of these formulas here, and we'll talk about user ID and security later on. But these formulas that you want to have here, and where you would use those are on these action fields. And one of the things I find easiest is just to right-click. I can go down to my functions and get a nice little drop-down menu of what some of my functions are, so I don't have to remember what every single one of them is. For instance, you wanted a field that you wanted to have a date field, and I'm not sure if this one has a date field. That's one of your good auditing fields, like a last updated date. We can certainly say, hey, when I'm updating this record, I want to initialize this with today's date, or the user ID even. For now, I'm just going to put in my address field here, but I can certainly put in my user ID. I can go down to security, go to my username, right? And this is how you would do those audit fields. I mean, obviously it's not your address field. You'd have a updated by or user ID or something. And then what we want to do is we obviously don't want them changing that when they're entering it. So we can come down here. There's two ways to do it. We can either make that our literal, or we can simply disable this edit field. I'm going to go ahead and disable it. So we'll see our, guys, got to find out where, see, enabled. I'm just going to change enable to false. So what happens if I edit this school district here, you should see my username. Instead of the address of the field, it's going to show my username here. So let me build it. Okay, so we'll just do that. And we'll go to our school districts, and we'll edit one, and it should have my name where the address is. But you would obviously, you'd have your own field for username or ID. And we will edit one, and sure enough, there's my username. And see, I'm clicking on it, but I can't change it. So you'd have a, last modified by, last modified date, and then, in fact, that's probably what this last date change is. I can make that be today's date right now, and make it not modifiable. So that way, when they edit this record and they save it, it would fill in the current date and time. Okay, I think that answers both the questions there. But yeah, I'm clicking on this field and it's not letting me change it there. Okay. So here's some of the things we can use the variables, database fields. Those are the ones that IronSpeed will generate for you. You'll see the database field name. You'll go, yeah, that's my database field name. Default values, and it pulls that from your database as well. You can actually reference other controls on the form as well. So if you have controls on the form and you want to use them in formulas, so like say you have a price and quantity, you want to multiply them together, you can refer to them as the panel name, control name, property. And you'll create a formula that actually references either database fields or other controls on the page. Okay. This is an example of we just mentioned where somebody wanted to do some auditing fields. You can say when adding a record, you want to put today's date or now, date and time, things like that. Another common example is if you want to have conditional field display, if you want to have something be in red if the unit's price is greater than 14, quantity is less than 10, then we'll just output some HTML code to make the field red. Another real common example, there's a couple of ways you can do this one. Display the multiple fields in the drop-down list. So you'll see where it says populate from database, so it has a first name plus last name. So you can do this either on the page itself, or you can actually do this on the database level, and we'll talk about that later, I believe. So the nice thing about doing it on the database level is that no matter where that field is showing up, that the sales rep ID, it would actually use that formula to display that. Instead of displaying the ID, it would use the formula to display that field. So that's another common thing about IronSpeed. If I change a formula for this particular field on this page, it only affects this page. But if I go here to my database, and I go to my school districts, say I go to my schools table, right, and I go to my school district ID, which is my foreign key to my school district, right, I can change the display as right here. I can change that formula here, and what will happen is that will be global to the whole application. So anywhere that school district ID would show up, it will actually use this formula here. Okay, any questions about that? I think we do talk about that later on when we talk about the database tab. Okay. Okay, if you've used IronSpeed for any length of time, you're probably familiar with the query wizard. That's the one that comes up if you modify your table controls. And you'll see them in a couple of places. So if I go here to my top level, let's go to my show table here, my school district table, and I go to my top. The query wizard is what comes up if I select on the SQL query here. Also, if I select on this query wizard here, these are the queries used on this page. But if I click on the little dot, oh, you know what? Hold on. There we go. There it is. Okay, so I click on this dot, dot, dot. That'll pull up the query wizard. So you've probably gone through this query wizard before. This is where you would add where clauses and override how the query is done for this particular table. This is also how you would go in there and you'd say you want to limit a salesperson's record to only their records. Since I'm logged into the application, I can filter certain tables based on my logged in user ID. And that's where you use the query wizard for that as well. Okay. I'm just kind of glancing. I can show you on this, where I have my school districts table, my schools for this particular district. You'll see IronSpeed generated this particular association for me. Another aspect, that's kind of what I just mentioned. Say I want to do a where clause. I can use formulas as well. Say, it won't work in this case because I can do a school district ID, but I can come here and do a formula, and I can come down here and say security user ID. I'd say I want it to be equal to my user ID. That's how you'd limit it based on logged in user. It won't work on this table, but that's how you would do a formula. I could look at a session variable, or say I wanted to pass a parameter to my page. I can go here and I can say equal URL and then my parameter name, and then it would limit the records to whatever was that parameter that was passed to the page. Okay. And some examples: cache, cookie, sessions, user ID. And this is an example I just talked about where we're limiting orders to a particular salesperson. When that salesperson logs on, they can filter just their records. Okay, so here's the caveat to using the query wizard, is that it only works with ands. So if you were to have 2 or 3 clauses in there, it's going to and them all together. So people ask, how do you do ors and nots and complex queries? There's certainly a way to do that. The easiest way is to override the create where clause in IronSpeed. And there's actually a class on that too. There's an advanced IronSpeed class on overriding the data access layer, and we talk about that in that class. Any questions about that? This comes up every so often in the forums. People will ask, how do we do this? We do ors and nots and things like that. How do we do in? How do we say I want a certain value to be in certain fields, in a certain list? So what you would do, I'll just show you here real quick. What you want to do there in that case is on this school districts query table, you can override the create where clause in this particular function. And if we were to look through here, we could see the code that IronSpeed generated. This has to do with which filters you selected and which fields are on there, with your searches and all your drop downs and your filtered values. But if we wanted to do an and or an or, we actually could come over here and modify this particular function that IronSpeed's generated and add that functionality to it. So it won't do it through the wizard, but we can do it manually by modifying this little where clause. And that's kind of, I'll be happy to show that later on if you guys just want to see that. That may be something you guys want to see at the end of the class. If not, there is an advanced IronSpeed class that they talk a little bit more about the data access layer. Okay. So if you want to see that, we'll show that later. But once again, just to repeat, it's not a query construction tool. I'm not actually going to do this particular step, display fields in several tables. For that, you would do a view and then point to that. And a lot of times, that's something that I personally recommend. Sometimes you notice that this particular demo, I'm pointing to a couple of tables. People often ask, hey, I started doing a page with a table. How do I change it? And unfortunately, once you drop a table on your form, you can't change it to point to a different table. So what you may want to do is, if you know you're going to do a search page and you want to pull in fields from other tables, you may want to go ahead and just start off using a view as opposed to doing a table. That can be hard to do if you're just getting into IronSpeed, to know when you want to start with a table or start with a view. But if you think you're going to want to add a lot of fields to something and let them search on it, it's probably best to go ahead and start with a view as opposed to a table. And then once again, do that at the database level. Create a view at the database level, and so the IronSpeed can use it on your page. And then it's just a matter of dragging and dropping it from the toolbox. Okay. Any questions so far? We're getting pretty close to the end here of our presentation, so we're going to have tons of time here to go over any kind of specific examples. So hopefully you guys got some things you'd like to see here at the end. But so far we are breezing through pretty quickly, and but let's keep going, and then we'll have some time. Okay, so let's talk about the databases section of IronSpeed. And once again, we talked about making your application. One of the very important things to do is to set up your application, your application database to be as complete, so to say, to begin with. Have it normalized, have it all the foreign keys defined, and things like that. That's going to really help IronSpeed determine how to lay out your screens and how to do drop downs and things like that. But in the case that it isn't, we can go to our databases tab and we can kind of override the behavior of IronSpeed. And this is where you go to do your virtual keys, your data conversion, things like that. Stuff that IronSpeed maybe didn't pick out of the application, pick out of the database correctly, or say you get a database with somebody that you can't modify. Say it's an old database, you can't make changes, add the foreign keys at the database level. You can certainly do that in IronSpeed, and this is where we would do it. Okay. So the example, like I mentioned before, we talked about do what they call display foreign key as. That is, say you have a foreign key like your sales ID, or you have an employee ID, sales rep ID, and anytime that ID shows up, you actually want to show the salesperson's first and last name. And IronSpeed actually makes it really nice for you. They make it pretty easy for you. If we go to our databases tab, and for instance, remember I was on my school district here, I can click on my little dot for my formula. And right now, so IronSpeed, it's pretty smart. It actually picked out that I want to show the school district name. Hey, how smart was that? So let's say we want to show the school district name and maybe another field from that same table. So I can come over here and I can modify this, and I can say I want to show which market that school district's in, which is another field in that same school district's table. So I'm going to add a little parentheses, and I'm going to, if I right-click here, IronSpeed knows that my school district ID points to my school district's table, and it shows all the fields from my school district's table for me. So I can simply, I don't even have to know the field name. I can just come here and say I want to show this field, and I want to do a little closing brace. So I have my fields, and that's in my display as. So if I go back to my layout editor, so anywhere where it would normally show that school district ID, it's going to use that formula that I just did to show instead of the school district ID. And building, building, building. Okay, let's go back and hopefully, let me reload. We go to my school. Oh, let me log in. Let me go to my schools and show schools. Okay, so now anywhere that I have my schools, it would normally show my school district. It should show the school district and the market. Let me edit a school here. So you know, I don't know if you can see it right here, but it says school district. It says Yorkville CUSID 115, and it has ORD in parentheses. That's directly from that formula that I just did. So even on my quick selector, it knows that formula. See all these little NYC, LAX, BOI, TUP. It's picking all that up directly from that formula that I did on the databases tab. And so that's global to the whole application. Anywhere that school district ID would normally show up, it's going to use that display as formula. Now, if I go and override it on a particular page, like a particular dropdown, it's only going to modify that one page. Okay. Somebody asked, it seems that not all database fields have the display as option. That's correct. It's only for the foreign keys that have that display as. So if you have a foreign key, for instance, my schools point to the school district, then those fields have the display as. But not every field has that. So if I go to my school district, I see my display as. But if say I go to my school name, it doesn't have the display as because that's not a foreign key into another table. Any questions about that? It's kind of powerful, by changing it just in one place in IronSpeed, we've told it that we wanted to display that one formula throughout the whole application. Okay. Somebody asked, so you should just use foreign keys? Well, certainly, yeah. That's how your database should be set up correctly. If it truly is a foreign key into another table. Now, for instance, say I got this as a database from somebody else. I can look here and I can see here it knows that this is if I go back to my school district, so right here it says foreign keys. It knows that is a foreign key into my school district's table. But I can go in here, I can override that and tell IronSpeed that actually is a foreign key into a different table. Or I can set up my own. If I can't go in there, I can't modify the database. It's some other table that you got from somebody. We can go in there and set up what are called virtual foreign keys, and then IronSpeed will use that to populate our drop-down lists and our quick selectors. Okay. So that's just one example of kind of using the database tab for kind of a global application-wide setting. Okay. The other thing, you probably noticed this. So when we went to our database tab, I have quite a few tables that are grayed out, and only very few of them actually are highlighted. And the reason is because those aren't included in my application. So if say I want to write some code to access a certain table, then I need to tell IronSpeed to actually generate the data access layer for that particular table. And there's two ways to do that. One is I can simply select a table here and tell that I want to include it in the application. I can change this include the application to the yes. Then IronSpeed would generate all the code necessary for it. The other way is I can simply drag that table from the toolbox to a page, and IronSpeed would generate the same thing. It would pull in all tables that were related to that table as well. So you notice that some of these tables that are highlighted are ones I didn't actually create. I'm not actually using, but they're related to the tables that I am using. IronSpeed pulls in through all the foreign key relationships. It'll pull in all the tables that it knows about for that particular table you want to use. So typically you don't have to worry about that unless you're doing a lot of code behind, unless you're doing a lot of stuff where you want to access tables directly. And once again, that's more of that advanced IronSpeed class. There's I think it's 302 or 304, 305, that talks about writing code to access the database layer directly. So normally in the normal use of IronSpeed, you would either use the application wizard to generate a page to modify a table in a record, or you can drag and drop it from the toolbox. IronSpeed takes care of all that before you in the background, and you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Somebody asked about the security option in the right-click menu. We'll get to that in a little bit. Somebody asked a question about some audit fields that we talked about earlier. We'll get to that and see why that's not working. But let's wait till after the rest of this, and we'll get to that. Okay. The other thing you may want to do is if you are working with say you have a production database and you have a development database, you can certainly go in there and change your connection string on that databases tab itself. You can go up here to the databases, go up to the very top and change the connection string for your particular database. That's not something typically that you would do a lot, but if you do, then changing the database is certainly doable in Arrowspeed. Obviously you do it through the wizard when you set up your database, and when you set up your application the first time, but if you want to change it to point to a production database without having to rebuild your whole application from scratch, then you can modify the connection string. Okay. Somebody asked, does this work where we want to migrate our code to another environment? Not sure what you mean by another environment. If you want to modify your connection string from one type of database to another, that may or may not work. Probably wouldn't work if you're trying to go from an Access to an SQL. Probably better to start from scratch. But if you have, oh yeah, so somebody asked, yeah, if you want to move it from, that's exactly where you would change it, is in this connection string. If you want to move it from development to production to QA, then you modify. It's also possible to go and modify the web.config directly. I've certainly done that. You can do it here. You can do it in the web.config. You got to be very, very, very careful modifying your connection string. The other thing is, and we'll talk about this later, is if you do that, you point to a different database, is to go ahead and run the synchronized database, just so that if there's anything that's different between production and your development machine, you can get some really weird errors. And if you see those, then you should go ahead and resynchronize your database. Okay. Somebody asked, can you demo that? I'd rather not, because I don't want to expose my connection string to my database, to my production database in my application. But if you go up there, you can go there and look in your web config, and you'll see the connection string at the very top of your web config. And that's the easiest way to change it, is to go in there and modify it. And what I've done, and what has worked for me and may work for you, is I will actually have two connection strings in the database with the same connection name. I'll comment one out and use one and then swap it to the other one. But you have to be very careful. Just make sure that you don't try to access both at the same time. But you could do that, and that has worked for me in the past. Okay. This is actually one of my clients' databases. I'd rather not expose that connection string. Okay. Change field display properties. Modify several field properties. Field validation type. Okay. Yeah, I can show that if you guys want. I think they're just talking about making a changing the field display properties. That's, for instance, if you had one time you say, okay, here's a good example. You wanted to modify your field display properties. Say you have a password field, right? Typically, when Arrowspeed generates your password field, person types it in, they're just going to see, asterisks. They're not going to see what they type. So what you can do is you can come in there and change your field display type, and I do this sometimes. If I go to my users table, I can find my users table. Hold on one second. What you do is you can change your users table from the type, from being a password to a string field, and then Arrowspeed will treat that just as a regular text field. and that way it won't display the asterisks for you. You know, when they're trying to type in the password. Say you're trying to type in your password to change, like a change password page. Hold on one second. There it is. Okay. For instance, if I go down to my password field, and we have a password field, and you notice right here it'll say that the validation type is password. So you may want to change it to just a string variable. I mean a string type, and that way when it creates the page, it will do it as a regular text field, not as a password type of the field. Okay. Somebody asked, does a migrator tool exist? Okay. There actually is if you're using Visual Studio. I'll show you this. There is a way to do that. Somebody's asking about the connection strings. Let me see if this will run. Visual Studio. Visual Studio actually has a way to modify that connection string when you publish it. I don't know if you know this or not. Teach you a little something here, a little something. So in Visual Studio, you can actually come down here and do what's called this is kind of outside the scope of IronSpeed, but I'm teaching you a little trick here. And I do this on some of mine apps. If I find my web config file, there's a way in Visual Studio, and you can right-click on there and tell that you want release. You want to tell it that you want to. I believe there's a way to config transform, and it'll actually it'll create a couple of web configs for you that'll transform it when you publish your application. So if you do use Visual Studio for publishing your IronSpeed application, you can have it configure this config transform that will modify the web config file, and you can modify your connection strings when you publish your application. That way, your development machine can be different than your production machine. So, I think if I add this, in fact, if I do it, see now you see web debug, web release, and it actually tells you in here how to modify your connection strings for release and debugging. So, little trick there. I'm just throwing that in there for you. That's once again, that's outside the scope of IronSpeed, so don't ask about that on the forums. But if you do want to do some transforms, you can do that. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. This is kind of one thing I mentioned earlier, that if you do, especially if you do try to have a development environment different than your production environment, you want to synchronize your database, only because IronSpeed generates that data access layer code based on what it looked at in your database. So it looks at your database, builds all those relationships, builds its code, expecting certain fields to be in your table. And if they're not there, you're going to get really weird errors when you run your application. And I've seen it many times. So if you start getting something that doesn't make sense, or you get displaying strange fields on your screen, then go ahead and run a resync. Okay. So you do resync, you do rebuild all. Very simple to do. I mean, I don't know why you do a scan only if you want to see those changes, but typically you just do a resync and rescan. I mean, a resync and accept the changes, and that usually takes care of all those kind of strange errors you may get. I'll do it if you want, but it takes a long time to resync. This is a production database. It's kind of large. You saw all the tables, so I'd rather not if I can avoid it. Any questions? We're very close to the end here. Maybe we'll take a little break and then just kind of do some one-on-ones if you want, or some Q&A. Well, I guess we are very close to the end. Here's if you want to learn more. So there are training videos. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at any of them. There's lots of videos out there. new ones all the time. And these all vary from basics to a lot of the advanced stuff. There are videos for that as well, especially database access layer, customizing those where clauses and things like that. Okay, this is the courses that once again this is 201. The advanced ones, if you want to delve into those, each one is a 1-hour class and they're all different topics. Lots and lots of online help. I'll tell you what, one of the best places to look for, and this is the page I go to all the time, go to online help in the formulas, since formulas are kind of very powerful and used all the time. One thing you might want to look at is if you go to the help menu, you can go to online help and then go to one that says formula language. This is a really good page to go to. This is because it tells you exactly how, there's a lot of formatting examples. Common formula examples are really common. You want to know how to hyperlink a URL, things like that. You want to do email, say you have an email field, go to this page in the help, and it tells you how to do that, hyperlink URLs, images, and emails. So if you don't look at any other help page, I would bookmark that one, just because formulas are so heavily used, and this example of common formulas is a really, really good place to get answers on how to do things. Okay, I mentioned it several times. If you have any questions that I haven't answered, or you have stuck on, you can certainly go to the technical forums and get free support there. Okay. Also, I guess the paid support. If you have a support contract, you can get support for IronSpeed. And also, you can talk to one of the MVPs. These are all the IronSpeed MVPs with links on the IronSpeed webpage. These are all experts in IronSpeed. We're all independent consultants. One of the requirements, though, to work with you is that you do have a current IronSpeed license. I've met all these guys. They're all very knowledgeable, very, very friendly, very helpful to anything that can help you, for consulting or help you do your database development, things like that. And last but not least, you can talk to your sales representative, and they may point you to a specific MVP or help you get started on projects. Well, that's pretty much the end of the class. I know it's a 3-hour class, but we kind of breezed through everything in 2 hours. I'll be happy to stay as long as you guys want and answer questions directly. And I won't even take a break here. Let's go ahead and, but you're free to, if you get everything you wanted out of it, this is the end of the actual class. But I will stay as long as you guys want and demonstrate anything that I can, at least for another hour. And but that is the end of the presentation, and then we will stay. And but if you want to stay and ask questions or watch other people's questions, that's fine. If not, you're free to go, and I'll stay as long as there's questions. Okay. So ask those questions, and I'll get in there. And there was one that was way back from the meeting, and we'll do that too. Okay. Okay. Somebody asked, trying to figure out the difference between an edit page and an edit table. I'm still working on an edit table, not an edit form. I can set it up so that the information can be modified, but how do I create an update button? I want to create a form to be filled out, but I can't seem to find a way to submit the changes from the table view. There actually is not a way. On an edit table, what happens is there's a save button. Let's go back to our IronSpeed Designer. So if you have an edit table, it's different than the actual edit form. Let's go back to our layout editor. So I don't actually have it. None of these are edit tables. So the IronSpeed generated app went ahead and generated a show tables, which obviously are literals, and then it has a little edit button next to it. And that goes to the form. So you can certainly go back and regenerate an edit page in the application wizard, and then change, drop an edit button on there. But normally, if you have an edit table, what you're expected to do is to put all your fields in there, and then click on the Save button for the edit table. And unfortunately, the Save button is under the Actions. So I tell you what, I'll run through the wizard real quick. I'll add an edit table, and I'll show you what it looks like. So say we go to our application wizard, and we go back to our pages, and let's just go do an edit table on our schools table. So it's typically, I don't like to use edit tables, but it's good if you have just one or two fields. Let's go to our schools table. Oh, oops, too far. Schools, and we will add an edit table. Okay, I'm going to add an edit table. Finish. This will just take a second to add this. Okay. Okay, so now we have an edit table here. So if I go to my, I think it's here. Okay, so this is my edit table that IronSpeed just generated. And so these are all quick selectors. So unfortunately, if you make a change here, what you're expected to do is to click on the Save button here under the Actions menu. So that's how you save the changes that you do on this form here. And so a lot of times what you can do, and I do this myself, is instead of having to click on the Actions and then the plus record, or say the added record or the Save button, what you can do is you can go to your designer. Let's go to our Edit School Districts table. That's the one we just generated. We can go down to our Actions panel, and those are our buttons. There's the New and then the Save button should be there somewhere. There's the New button. Edit School Districts table. We should have our Actions panel, right? Am I on the right page? Edit School Districts table, right? Edit Schools. Oh, Edit Schools table. That's why I'm on the wrong page. Edit Schools table. Okay. If we go to our Actions panel, what you can do is there's our Add and our Save button. We can actually take these two buttons. We can cut them from where they are. Kind of go up to our Actions panel here, and just paste them on here, and that kind of pulls them out of that little drop-down panel. Paste, and we can drop down to here in our Save. We'll cut it, go back, and paste it here. Oops. Okay, so now we have them at the same level. Build it. And so what you get then is on that same page, and I'm reloading it here. So now you see the little Save button and the Add button are outside the little Actions panel. So that way you can click on Add here, you can click on Add a couple times, change them, and then just click on the Save button. Okay. Okay, somebody asked for an example way at the beginning of class, and let's do this real quick, okay? Let me find this question here. Okay, on the table, is it easy to make a control disappear based on the data? Okay, very good question, very, very excellent question. Okay, that person is still here, so let's do that. So the question is, we want to hide some data on a row. we will hide some data based on a we'll hide a row based on data. Probably one of the easiest ways. There's a couple of ways to do that. Let's do a schools table. I'm going to try this. Okay, let's try this. It may take me a couple minutes, but we will do this. Let's do a show schools table. Let's say we want to hide all the. I'm going to go ahead and just do that. Let's see if we can hide all the schools that are middle school. Okay, so here's a row, and we're going to hide rows that are based on a condition. Okay, I believe that was what somebody wanted to see. One way you could do it is you could always do a view and just show the view based on the condition. But if you actually do have a table here and you want to hide a row based on a condition, then what we'll do is we will go ahead and we're going to show school table. We're going to run this code customization wizard. Like I said, there's a couple ways to do this. One way I like to do it is to use the wizard. There's a wizard that says highlight a row based on a condition. And what we'll do is we'll start with that, and then if the condition is true, we'll try to hide the row. The other way to do it is through the control pre-render. You can do it on the pre-render event. I believe it calls a pre-render on that. That may actually be easier. Let's try this first. Okay. Keep thinking of some other things you guys want to see, because right now this is the only thing I got. So if we go here, we have one called highlight a row based on a condition. Highlight a record row based on a condition, okay? Okay, sorry. So we want to do our schools table control, and we'll pick a row and we'll say school type. There's one called school type. School type, okay. And it generates some code for us that we're going to go in there and modify. Okay, so we'll see it actually has the wrong type, but anyway, what we'll do is we will go in there and modify this particular code, and we will make it work. Okay, so finish this. We're going to let it generate that code. And if you guys haven't done the code customization wizard before, what that does is it's kind of like some template code that IronSpeed will throw in there that you can go in and modify. Okay, first of all, we know that this is a text field. So we're going to say if this is a middle school, I'm going to leave the code that it has because it's to make the row yellow. So what we're going to do is school type text equals yes. We're gonna make it, if it's a middle school, then we're gonna make it yellow, and then what we do is we'll try changing that so that it's we'll try hiding it. Okay. So you can see what it does. It actually adds the style to make it yellow. Let's build that. Okay, first thing I do, I actually do have to go in and modify something on the row. And if you read the help there, it said I have to go in there and add something. I have to add a, I think I have to add a my ID. I think I have to say ID my TR. I think so. That's why it can find that row later on. Let's build it and see if that's right. I think also have to, there's a couple things you have to do to get that particular code customization wizard to work, and I doubt it's going to work this first time. Okay, yep, let's see, it's not right. I didn't find it. Let's go back here. And I always do this wrong the first time. Oh, I know. We have to do a run at server. We have to do I believe that is correct. If not, I have to go to this customization wizard again. Make sure I did all that right. Let me just make sure I did everything right. There's a couple steps you have to do on this particular one. Okay, I read cell with the ID. Okay, yeah, ID my TR right server. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that worked. We have it highlighting them all yellow. Okay. And I think what we can do is we can actually make the row visible. We can set the visibility to false on that and see if it hides those rows, I think. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to launch Visual Studio, mainly because I want to make sure I get my autocomplete working. Okay, and I think what we can do is, I think we can just set the record row visible false. And then setting the color won't matter because I'm setting the whole row visible to false. Okay. Now let's see if that worked. I'm just winging it here. No, we'll see if this works. Okay, let's try that. And hopefully it'll make the whole row invisible, all these middle schools. And look, it worked. Ta-da! So there's no middle schools there. Okay. Hopefully that was the question. Okay. So the next question was, can we discuss the auto feature again? I'm not able to pull my user ID from the right-click menu. Interesting. Let's take a look here. So obviously, in order to use the user ID, we have to add the security first. So if the user ID is not showing up, obviously to make sure you're signing in. If you're not getting the sign in and the sign out, then that user ID will not show up as an option for security. This particular table doesn't have anything based on user ID, but the question was, I guess they said the user ID is not showing up as a formula. So if we go to our wizard, and it's not going to be everywhere that formula shows up. For instance, it's probably only going to be in certain things like the SQL query. So say we want to add a where clause, and I'm just picking any field here, and it should have functions, security. So somebody's saying security wasn't showing up under the right-click menu. But I think that should show up everywhere, even if I were to go to, even if I were to go to a formula here. I'm sorry, if I were going to the display, that formula should show up for security. I guess the question would be, do you have the other? I mean, does nothing show up there? I've never actually seen where that does not show up. Does date and time string math logical format? So my question would be, do those other fields show up? Okay, someone says, can you demo validating a column value on the inserted row of an edit table control? When I do it, I get the value from the first data row in the table and not from the inserted row. Interesting. Okay, let's try. That is a good question. Edit schools table. Luckily, we just added an edit schools table. Somebody was asking about validating a value on a row. Let's see if we can do that real quick. So let's see, let's try validating like the school type. Or let's say school name must not be blank. Let's try that. Let's try adding a validation on this. Fields, school name, validate when saving data, validate when saving records. Let's try that. Okay, so it's going to look something like this. Okay, but let's do a validation, and we'll kind of do a similar validation as being required. We'll just say if it's not blank. Okay, so we'll say if school table control name, school name to text equals, and we'll just say blank. Error must not be blank. School name must not be blank. Okay, so school name, if the school name text is nothing, then we'll throw an error. Let's try that. So somebody was asking about validation on a edit table. Okay, let's try it. No guarantees. Let's try adding a record. You know, so I pulled my little plus signs out. And what we'll do is we'll add a test school, which I'll have to remember to delete later. And test. Okay, we'll leave this one blank and see if it gives us an error on that one. School name must not be blank. Okay, that was the second row, so that looks like it worked. Let's go ahead and add a school here. School 2. Test. So now I added school names to both of them. Let's try saving it. And it looks like it worked. So I can say search for test. So I would think that that's how you do it. So if I went too quick there, let me know. So I went to my field in my edit table, and under my validate when saving row, and it should look something like this. It should say school table control row. Look something like that. So let me know if that will work or if that doesn't work for you. Any other questions? We got lots of time. Oh, I think that's everything. Okay. Oh, that's a very good question. Somebody asked, I have figured out how to filter records and how to set up the filter options, but I would like to either have the filters to stick on each load or have a default set of filters turned on. Okay. Let's see if we can do that. Let's continue with our show schools table. Let's say we want to initially filter these by high school, but we want to be able to change them. So probably the easiest way to do this, we go to our filters panel. And if we look here, if we look at our filters, maybe we drag some here. School name. I probably want to add some filters. Let me see if we can add. Let's add some filters for our schools. We'll filter our school type. Okay. But I'm pretty sure we can actually. I think you'll like this. We can filter our. They should have formulas for the filters, just like they are for any other field. So we can actually pass it a parameter to the page. We can use a formula for the default value for a filter, just like we can when inserting a record, any kind of field. So let's go to our schools table, which It's right down somewhere. Schools. Okay, schools. Filter for schools, right? And we want to do a filter on our school type. Let's just drag a filter here. So we have a school type filter. Let's build that. First of all, let's turn off our hiding our row, just so we can see them. I guess I should show you my generating application. There we go. Okay, so now what we do is we added a filter for our schools type. Show schools. So we added a filter for our schools type, right? So E, H, and M so we want all the middle schools, right? So there's all the, oh, go. Middle schools. Ta-da. So, but I think the question was, I want to have them stick on or load on default set of filters turned on. So that's actually pretty easy to do. Let's go back to our show schools. And I'm actually going to change that from a quick selector to a text box, just I'll show you here. But if you look here, you notice that all these filters actually have default values. They should have initialized. Here we go. In fact, IronSpeed actually put it as a code. IronSpeed went ahead and did a formula for passing a school type for your filters, and that'll be the default value for your school filter. But we should be able to change that and just say we want to default to high schools. You can put it here and initialize, put any kind of default filter you want, and that'll be the default, but you can still change it. And you could use any kind of formula. So if I had a session variable or I wanted my user ID, say I wanted to filter records based on my user ID, I could do that, but still let them change it to be any kind of value they want. Let's refresh this page. So now it should default to only showing high schools, in theory. Okay, there we go. See, high school, type H, right? But I should be able to go here and change it. See, it defaulted to type H, which is what I set there. But I can still change it to E if I want. And let's see if it did. Yep, see enough. It changed it to all E's. So I think that's an answer to the question. Yep. Excellent. Anything else you guys want to see? Like I said, we got time. Lots and lots of time. Oh, somebody asked, did you demo how to audit when a record is saved? Who saved it? Certainly. Sure. We can do that. That's just a simple matter of, going to our edit school districts. Let's go to our edit school districts. That's very easy. There's videos on that on the IronSpeed website, but we can certainly go to our edit school fields. I mean, just like we did here, where we picked a field here, and we just changed the formula. In fact, that's what I did right here. Is I just changed this formula. Just pick a field and say initialize with editing record. Put username, and that'll save the user who edited this record last. There's actually two ways to do that. One is you can do that at the field level here. You can also do that through the database level. We can also do that here under the database level if we go to our schools table. So what happens is, if I did it, remember before when I say if you do something on the page level, it only affects that page. So if I put my last edited by field here, and I change my initialize when editing to my username, that's all fine if I only edit a record on this page. But what if I had another page that also had a record on the school districts and it allows me to edit fields, and I don't have that same field showing there and setting to the value? Then what will happen is obviously it won't capture it. So what we can do is we can also do that at the database level. We can add these auditing fields at the database level, Come down here to our school districts table. I mean our schools table, school districts. And we could pretty much do the same thing that we did on the field on the page. We could do it at the database level, and that is we could go to our school districts table, our same address field that we had, and change the formula for an updating a record. We could do the same thing here, and IronSpeed would do that when it saved the record. You wouldn't see it on the screen to say who was the last one to edit it because it would update it when it saves the record. But you could do it here, and then anywhere in your application where that record was modified, it would throw in the current user ID. So there's two ways. One is to add the field on the page and then set the value via the formula, and the other way is through the database tab and put the formula here for the user ID. Okay, any more questions? What else can we show you? Okay, somebody asked about MSI deployment. To be honest, I've never used it. I've never ever done MSI deployment. What I typically do, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with Azure, and they have a new thing called Web Deploy, which will, and this works with any kind of website that you can do. I think I use on Azure, but you can do it with other anything that runs IIS. You can set up your website for what's called Web Deploy, and publish straight out of Visual Studio. Tools. I pretty much don't do any kind of deployment out of IronSpeed anymore. What you can do is, if worse comes to worse and you can't get MSI deployed to work, you can actually copy your whole folder to your production server, and that will work. Your server will compile and run your application just as if you had deployed it. All the deploying does is it copies everything except for like your code behind files and the IronSpeed files that are needed just for IronSpeed. But if you want to, you can get it to work by copying the whole folder or synchronizing your folder. But I typically use what's called MS Deploy, which is if you load in Visual Studio and you go to Deploy in Visual Studio under Debug, especially if you're using Azure, it's all built into Visual Studio. Hold on, let me build it here. Publish. You go to Publish. You can point to your Azure websites, and it'll compile it, package it, load it up to Azure, and you're good to go. But you can also do a connection that's straight to an MS Deploy. You can import an MS to a publish profile, and that works with IIS. You can have IIS do what's called Web Deploy for your website. It'll create a file that you can import straight into Visual Studio, and Visual Studio will package your application, upload it, and it is very, very, very fast because it only sends the changes. It's really good if you're making a lot of changes to your website because Visual Studio will only push the changes that have occurred. So if you only change one file, you're not going to publish the whole application. So to be honest, this is pretty much how I publish my applications now, is to use just Visual Studio and Web Publish. I'm sorry, yeah, Publish. Web Deploy. Let me find that real quick here. There's lots of articles on it. That's kind of their new thing, Web Deploy. So It's called web deploy. Oh, somebody was asking. Oh, change password. That's correct. Changing a password is not included in IronSpeed, and I don't know if that's just because there's so many ways to do a change password that may require. You may have want to do complexity results. I've done change passwords on my own where I've made sure they haven't reused a password. I think there's just too many variables there for IronSpeed to do a change password page. It's not that hard. You can certainly just do a page, a user record page, and throw the password up there and make it required, and that would be pretty much all you need. But you may want to have like a a my record page that has other parameters, the person's phone number, the person's email, and then just the password would be one control on that page. But IronSpeed does do the recover email password. Forgot my site information. It does that for you because it looks at just the username, password, and the email field. So the only thing with doing the recover password is you have to go in there and set up a Google CAPTCHA control, the reCAPTCHA control. That's the only downside to that is you have to go in there and create a Google account with the URL of your website, and then Google will give you a couple of keys that you go in there and you plug in on your IronSpeed page. If I go to my recover password page under security, you'll see where those are under the forgot user page. Sorry, send user info. You'll see right here they have a couple of fields for the Google page. Let's see. Somewhere it used to be here. I haven't done it in a while, but I think there's a couple places to put that key in. Oh. Sorry, here we go. It's probably here. Yeah. reCAPTCHA, and then you want to put in your codes from Google somewhere. Oh yeah, private key and public key. Person said I'm trying to prepare a live server. Like I said, preparing a live server, you could just install IIS and just copy your whole source folder over there into your virtual folder in your IIS, and that will work. That's probably the simplest way to get your website up and running, is just to copy your program folder. And it's fairly secure because the people are not going to be able to download your web config file. They're not going to be able to download your CS files or your VB files, because IIS is going to prevent those from being downloaded. So you can do that as a last resort for deployment, just to make sure everything works, is just to copy the whole source folder over there. Okay. Somebody asked, this is the last question that came up, to show or hide columns based per user choice. Okay, we can try that. Let's do our show schools table. Now, it's probably not going to look. Let's do this. We could add a little checkbox here and hide certain columns. The problem is you can't really let them pick which columns to show and hide, because IronSpeed is a code generator, and at design time you're telling it which columns to show. So we could programmatically hide one based on the value of a checkbox on the page, but we couldn't say, hey, let the user pick 4 or 5 columns and then you display them dynamically. You could, but you'd have to write code to go in there and actually do your own table control and table row, table data. But we can certainly hide controls based on a checkbox. Show school districts table. Let's go to our show schools table. Let's go to our show schools table, and we'll hide a couple of fields based on whether or not they have a checkbox to set. Let's go ahead and We'll put it right in our header. We'll put a little checkbox in our header. How's that sound? Hold on, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the best place to put a little checkbox in there. So I'm going to get rid of this whole table. Row. Actions. Okay, we're going to drop a checkbox on here. Oops. Let's drop a checkbox. Oop, ah. And we'll rename this. We'll call it Show Checkbox. I cannot type. Show Checkbox. And what we'll do here is I'm going to do this in Visual Studio just so I can get my wizard showing for me. Close. Yes, let's do this. Let's build it, and I think we have our table control row, our pre-renderer, right? Okay. Okay, build. Hold on, I'm sorry. So what we'll do is we'll just hide a couple of fields based on a checkbox. A couple of ways we can do that. We could do it on that control pre-render event, but for right now I'm just going to hide the school name based on whether that checkbox is checked or not. So two ways to do this. One way is I'm going to do it under this control, this set function code, and this is the code that actually goes in there and takes the database value and puts it on the page. And what we'll do is we'll just check to see if the checkbox is checked. If it will make it visible, if not, we'll make it not visible. So tell you what I'll do, and I do this all the time. So I'm just going to throw my initials in here right now. And you're like, why are you throwing your initials in there? That's just so I can find it when I load Visual Studio. So now I can just do a little find on my initials. Oh, it's actually in the school table. Did I not type it in right? Yeah, set school name. Built it. So this is just one way you could do that. There's a couple of ways you could do it on the pre-render event. You could do it on the, there we go. Okay, so there's the set school's name, right? So what we could do is here, we could just simply say, you know, this dot school name dot visible is equal to show checkbox. Okay, and this is where we're going to see that I have to use the do what's called find control, because what happens is this is on a table control row, so it's in a different class than where I actually define my checkbox. So what's going to happen is I have to go in here and do a find control. So we're going to do a checkbox, and you've probably seen this code a lot. Equals find control equals this.page find control recursively. And I think it was called show checkbox, right? As a checkbox. Equals c.visible, c.checked. If. Always good to throw a little checking there. Okay. Let's make sure I name that right. Yeah, show checkbox. Okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, reload. Okay, so obviously, notice my school names are not being shown. Oh, actually, I need to do an auto postback on that, so that when I change it, it will reload the page. Will do. Let's try that again. It's not reloading my page. Oh, let's do this. Let's do smooth panel updates false. May have to do with the fact that that's in a update panel. Let's try this. Looks like it's working because it's hiding the school name, but it's not reloading the page when I check it. Well, I may have to do like a trigger to tell it to refresh that page. Let's do this. 1 second. I'm going to try one thing here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Let's do check. Let's make it check. Let's default to true. Okay, you get the idea. Where I just find a control on the page and I set the visibility based on that. It's probably just not regenerating this page, it's reading it from the cache. So, okay, is there anything else I can show you? Okay, unless there's anything else you want to see, then this is pretty much it. It was a very quick class today. Okay, I'll give you another couple seconds. If not, then I appreciate you guys taking the time for the class. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask them in the forums or contact any of the MVPs or the online support. Okay, I guess that's it then. Thank you for attending the class today.